Hey Titans, this is Mordecai from GamerTitan.com. In this video, we're going to be going over the relatively new vehicle system that was implemented into Core. So the vehicle system allows us as creators to implement vehicles into our projects extremely easily. So first, to just go ahead and get a vehicle working in your project is a very basic example. You could just go to Core Content, you can go under Game Components, click on Vehicles, and you can see all of the current vehicles that Core offers out of the box. You could also simply, in Core Content, just search for vehicle. And to actually get a vehicle working in your project, you just drag it into your project. I'll go ahead and press play just to show you. So here's my player. I can run up to the door, I can press F, and now I'm actually able to drive the truck around, which is really cool. And I can hop back out, and there you go. Vehicle in Core. Extremely cool. So with this, there are a few settings. So for example, if you're making a game, you don't want all of your vehicles most likely to have the exact same stats. Maybe you're trying to make a racing game and you want some vehicles to steer better, some of them to have a higher top end or to accelerate quicker. And so all of those options are available to us as a creator. So there's a new object type called vehicle in Core, and that's the parent object. Now, one thing I will note is vehicles are networked, so that is something to take it into consideration. If you actually are using a lot of these in your game, you might want to keep that in mind. For example, if you're trying to use a lot of vehicles for art, you wouldn't necessarily want to use a vehicle object. You could just use the geo of the vehicle, which would be found under client content, or client context rather, and then the geo. So how the vehicle system works is there's actually this green box is the actual collision. So if I were to run over something, as long as it's underneath the green box, the car will be able to go over it. The other thing is you can see that there's these yellow where the wheels are. This is the actual wheels, and so on the server it's the yellow and the green, and then the actual client is everything else. So what I mean by that is like all what you see visually of the truck, this is all client side, and so we can make modifications to the geo and it wouldn't impact how the vehicle drives. In fact, we could just flat out turn off the visibility and it would work just the same. So if you're an artist and you're just wanting to modify how the vehicle looks, you're going to want to focus on the actual geo inside of the client context. So let's go ahead and go over a few of the properties here. So the first one we have access to is max speed. Now in Core, it uses centimeters as the distance, and so if you're not really sure, what a centimeter is, I believe there's a measuring. Yeah, there's a measurement tool, which I'm not sure how to use, to be honest. There we go. So what you do is you drag this one from that point and the height. So that's 320 centimeters. At any rate, a better way to kind of notice how fast this vehicle is if we go to the third person player settings. The actual player, if it's the default settings, they run at 640 centimeters per second as the max speed. I think this is second. At any rate, and then for mounts, the max speed is 1280. And so the acceleration for mounts is 1800. So if we go back to the vehicle here, its max speed is 6500. So it's roughly 5 times faster than the default mount speed, is a good way to look at it. And then for acceleration, this is how quickly per second it increases its speed up until it hits its max speed. So because the max speed is 600 or 6,500 and the acceleration is 620, it would take roughly 10 seconds to go ahead and hit the max speed in this vehicle with this current acceleration. Now, turn radius, this one is how well the vehicle can actually turn. And so with the actual radius, to be completely honest, this is a slightly confusing way to do the turning, but the lower this number is, the better it will steer, as in the more it can actually, the vehicle can actually make a quick turn. So to give you an example, with 1,000, if I turn my wheel and I start going, this is with the default. So I would almost hit this wall right here. However, if I turn this to 0 or like 1, you'll see that the wheels are able to turn not realistically. So the thing is this, while this is cool at a lower speed, if the vehicle starts going fast and then you try and turn at that crazy radius, you can see that it could get pretty difficult to steer this vehicle if you're trying to actually have a racing game. And so depending on the speed of the vehicle, you'll want to mess with this. Anywhere between like 600 to 1,000 is the range that I found is pretty decent. And so there you go. So that's a bit better. And obviously that vehicle could steer very well. So at any rate, the lower this number is, the more the vehicle could steer. However, at high speeds, having this number too low isn't necessarily recommended. The other thing is friction. So friction is, the higher the number, the better the tire's grip to the ground. So for example, if I were to put this, at like 0.01, the vehicle would slide a lot more when I was trying to turn. It's kind of hard to, there you go. So you can see it just like, it burns out just by turning. So that's a very cool setting to have if you're wanting to make cars be able to drift, because each vehicle also has a built-in handbrake by simply pressing space. And so I actually wrote a script that by pressing the handbrake, it kind of makes the back end go out just like that, while also having better grip while the vehicle is actually driving. So once I optimize that script more, by the way, I'll go ahead and release that to community content. So the friction, the default for this was 10. I believe the go-kart is like 3 by default. And so just play around with these values. These are the main ones for what most racing games would want. The other is braking strength. This is how quickly the vehicle can come to a stop. So I believe the lower this number is, the worse the vehicle actually is able to slow down. Let's verify that. Yeah. So I've actually been braking and it's taken a while. So these, I would say the top 5 are the ones that you'll really want to be playing around with to kind of make your vehicles feel differently in your game. So a lot of this other stuff, the mass. So first off, the coast brake strength when not applying gas. This is basically how quickly the car will slow down if they're not actually braking, I believe. The other is mass. So if you have a truck and you have a go-kart, you would want the truck to have a higher mass, because that way when the truck hits the go-kart, it would actually push it. I would recommend leaving this at the default for the most part, because I know that there's a few things that could go wrong if you adjust the mass too much. The other is center of mass. So I'm not sure how to actually get a visual of where this is. I believe it starts at the center of the vehicle, and then we are 20 on the x-axis. So the center of gravity is roughly right here. And so you'll want to try and keep this to the center of your vehicle for the most part. If you were to move this way to the front of the vehicle, let's say I put it at 500. Okay, so there's an indicator, it's this little circle. So most likely, because the center of mass is way over here, the car's just gonna flip. Yeah, so you can see that the center of mass, because it was way in front of the car, it's now bugging out. So for the most part, like I said, you want to keep the center of mass to the actual center of the vehicle. It'll just make it work better. However, you could do some slight adjustments if you were wanting to get more in depth with your vehicle. I know some vehicles are like front end heavy and stuff like that. So the center of mass is what you'd want to do to mess with that. However, I would suggest not adjusting it too much, because as you can see, if you go overboard, things could get a little wonky. So the gravity scale, so this is just like, you know, player gravity. If I were to set this to 0, and then I don't have any ramps, so I don't know if I can really, let's see, if I hit this bump, no, that wasn't enough. Okay, there we go. So you can see with 0, the vehicle basically just kind of floats wherever it last was, right? And you can even do negative gravity if you really wanted to. And the vehicles will actually, if you had like let's give you a better example. If we put like a block, the vehicle will actually, if I can actually get in it, it'll drive around upside down. I didn't make the cube big enough, but you get the idea. So with gravity, once again, for the most part, you probably want to keep this to 1. To be honest, I found that has worked best with the vehicles that I have messed with. So let's see here. So the other is body offset and body scale. So this is actually the green box that we were talking about. So if you wanted to make a larger vehicle, the actual body scale is what you would mess with. Now there are a few things to note. You want to try and keep some space between the collision box, which is the green cube, and wherever the ground is. Because if we were to move this collision box all the way down to the ground, like for example, it would run into this right here and it would completely stop the vehicle. So you want to try and keep space between the wheels and the actual box. So the truck's actually a pretty good example, because most of the geo is filled into this box, but there are other types of vehicles, right, that this might get a little more challenging. A tank is a good example, where the treads are, you would think that they should have the collision wrapped around them. However, it's better to, like I said, make sure you've got adequate space between the collision box and the ground, or else the actual vehicle will have a lot of trouble. The other thing you can do is with the offset, you can actually adjust it. Just take note that you know, where the wheels are, you want to keep your center of gravity roughly in between that, and then based on the geo, it would have no impact. So like this collision wouldn't impact the gravity. So it's really dependent on the type of vehicle that you're trying to make. And sorry, not the gravity, the center of mass. So the other settings are for the wheels. Now, with the actual geo, there's a wheel group underneath the client context. As you can see, each wheel is its own object. And so what you do is on the vehicle, what you want to do is you want to have 4 wheels, and you want to set them up in the right areas. And then what you want to do is you want to reference in the vehicle the actual wheel. And so the radius is how big the wheel actually will be, and then the width is how wide the actual wheel will be. And so I would recommend keeping these radiuses and width the same. For example, on the front 2 tires, keep them the same. On the back 2 tires, keep them the same. You could have larger back tires than front tires, but it's probably a good idea to keep them, you know, roughly the same. So the other thing you can do is, if for whatever reason your wheel is in a different location, that's what this offset is for the wheels. So if I were to move this wheel back here, you can see that even though on the Geo, when I'm working in the project, I have the wheel here. What's happening is when the vehicle is getting attached, basically at runtime, it grabs this wheel and it puts it to where the server thinks the wheel or where the server knows the wheel should be. It moves the visual to that area. So if you're seeing something like that, that's the cause of it. You need to make sure that your actual wheel is in the right location, and then it will actually show up where it should be. The few other options you have on the vehicle itself is you can adjust if there's an enter trigger or not, if you want to actually attach the driver, or if you want to hide the driver. So if you don't want to attach the driver, as an example, I can still run up and drive the pickup truck, but now my player didn't actually go in the vehicle, but now I'm able to actually still drive the vehicle. And so, you know, something like this you could do for like an RC car or something like that. It does have its uses. One thing I would suggest, however, is you probably would still want to change the camera, because as you can see, I have control of the camera, but my WASD is currently driving the car, and I have no way to exit it without, oh, so the exit binding is F. That's what that exit binding was, which is right here. So if I didn't have that, however, I'd have to basically drive the car back to me to then be able to hit the trigger again to detach myself from driving it. The other thing you could do is hide the driver. So as you can see, my character as it isn't actually in there. And then if I uncheck this and hop in there, now I can see it. So that has its uses as well. I've seen some creators do some really cool things. One of the games, or a few of the games I should say, made like a jet ski. And so they actually used, I believe, a static mesh to put it on the jet ski, and then it wasn't the actual character. That way you can, if you're not hiding the driver, then whatever outfit they have on will show up in the truck or show up in the vehicle. However, if you wanted to guarantee that they're wearing a helmet or something like that, you would want to hide their actual character and then just have like a static mesh that appears with the proper outfit and stuff like that. So that's one way to do that. Other than that, there's the animation stance. And so when the player is actually in the vehicle, this is the animation that they'll switch to. So right now it's just unarmed sit car low, and that's because that animation, actually to show you, the other thing you could do is you can actually offset where the driver will be. So it's this blue right here, this blue cylinder. So now when I hop in the vehicle, I'll be way up here, and I did that so you could see the actual animation. So you'll want to set your player or the driver position to be as close to the seat as possible in terms of like them actually sitting there. In this particular vehicle, we'll reset it back to where it was. So as you can see, like the bottom half is actually in this, while the top half isn't, and that's how it's getting the player to sit in this particular seat. The other thing you can do is you can also rotate if you want to actually rotate the driver for whatever reason. And then the other last setting on the actual vehicle object itself is the camera. And so the actual camera is inside the client context, and I'm not entirely sure why it's just pointed in the trunk here, but the actual settings are on the camera itself. So if you wanted to adjust, I guess this is better just show it this way. So as you can see, like I can move my camera freely, but if I turn, so my hand's off the off the mouse right now. So if I turn, I'm still facing that direction. And so speaking of cameras, there actually is a cool component. If we go to vehicles, that is the vehicle global camera controller. So if we go ahead and drag that into our project, I could still turn, I could free look, but as I drive, so here, so I'm looking at the side of the vehicle and my hand's off the mouse now. And now when I drive, it automatically tries to keep the camera to be behind the vehicle. So this has a much better racing effect in terms of like cameras go. I wasn't aware of this component for a long time, and to be completely honest, I tried making my own and it didn't go too well. So it was really cool to have this as an actual component they can just drag in. And this actual component has a lot of different settings as well that you can adjust. It also by default has a look behind. So if I press Q, I can look behind me, which is pretty cool. And that is about it for the vehicle object itself. Like I said, the enter trigger, this is the actual trigger that the player can run up to and click to actually enter the vehicle, if you so desire. There's a few scripts by default. One of them is if the car flips upside down, there's a script to automatically flip it back right side up. If you don't want that, you could simply uncheck this here, and it would, if the vehicle flips over, then the vehicle's just flipped over. It wouldn't try and fix it. The rest of it is just the actual, the geo, the lights, and the effects and stuff like that. In terms of actual properties that are able to be modified at runtime now, if you go to the script helper and then go to vehicle, there's quite a bit of them now. Anything with dynamic, you can actually set at runtime. However, there's a few properties that I believe we weren't supposed to be modifying on like a tick. I'm not really sure which ones. I've done some testing with the turn radius. The turn radius is an important one because in most racing games, the faster you're going, you don't want, in most racing games, the faster the actual player is going, usually you don't want them to always have like the full turning ability and be able to make perfect turns into a corner. Usually you want them to have to slow down to be able to turn, or like they'll start sliding, because that's just how vehicle physics is in real life. If you're going super fast and you try and turn, you're probably going to slide into the guardrail. And so turn radius is one of those that allows you to mess with that. Traded vehicles turn speed. There's also driver entered and exit events. So this is really cool if you want to do different things based on when an actual player hops into a car or hops out. Yeah, so like I said, there's a lot of different things that you can mess with here. You can even add impulse to the vehicle. So if you wanted to do something like a speed boost, that's one way that you could do it. As soon as the vehicle hits a trigger or something, does an impulse and speeds the vehicle up real quick. So with this video, I just wanted to kind of go over the basics. I'm planning on making a more advanced video for vehicles that's more in line with the actual scripting, because I've been personally messing with writing some of my own scripts to try and make the vehicle steering and acceleration and stuff like that be able to be modified based on like quote unquote what engine the vehicle has and stuff like that. So I do plan on making my next video be going into the actual scripting and a few of the things that I've actually tested and have done with the vehicle system. So hopefully this video was helpful. I know it was a bit long, but the vehicle system is extremely cool in core. We've already seen a lot of cool games hit the platform since the vehicle system has come out, and I am very excited to see what you all can create with the vehicle system. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments down below. If you like this video and you want more correlated content, please hit that thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you next time, Titans.